Yeah. It's pretty amazing because, you know, you've got things going on in the world where somebody's labelled, you know, and labels are sort of like, I guess, to get a handle on something. But in the label that somebody gets, could the handle be like presuppose that things within that handle of the label could be questioned? Like, so for instance, like somebody would say, well, for a power of attorney where someone is in guardianship and what have you, that someone has to have a relative awareness about things. So someone in the system might have far more awareness about, like, how does someone receive assistance where they are, and this sort of thing, and was there a proper diagnosis where things were, where things are? It's pretty certain that you know, there could be just not so much experience, perhaps, and wherever somebody is, degrees of our capacity to have reasoning. And so dementia, because of the complexity, people could just say, oh, well, I had not ease of time to cause instruction to be followed, and for reason that somebody couldn't follow instruction. But someone could if they had care, like, you know, 24/7 if that was needed for some moment and stuff, you see. And that could be in someone's home, where their own home, and they can be receiving what they would, but it doesn't cost as much or anything, but it's far better in a home. And degrees of everything which exist about this. So where a power of attorney is, where someone is, you know, to be really good, they'd have to first of all guard against iatrogenic condition, because you've got a very large percentage of people who pass on because of medical error. And in the situation where somebody should have a proper diagnosis, most really cannot necessarily have that done or haven't had it done. And if it is, what's being passed on where something is, you see. So where corporations jump in there, they could act in a manner that sort of really, kind of in the way they operate, is to perhaps take away your power of attorney yourself, to request a doctor, see a doctor, and do things just like that, because you're being given a service, sort of thing. And so most people would know that it's something about that's pretty inferior relative to your capacity to be able to, you know, make decisions and be able to understand things, but also to, if you're able to be in your own home, that's not having to be sold and given all the currency for it to some operation, which could be just like babysitting where someone is and using drugs more or less to zombify relatives. So everybody, as they're incapacitated, that's a way apparently to just resolve the circumstance of some dementia. But that's very complex, isn't it? Because the word dementia is like a label, but if somebody's been given the label, oh, there's some dementedness, it means if somebody gave that who's a caregiver, like who's got power of attorney, it's the way that actually somebody has to go forward where anything is, and something must be scientific a bit about, like, how much authority or something is given to whoever's the power of attorney, because, you know, you've got to be carrying out the will of what your person is, but that something must be overall that you know, because there could be some degrees of incapacitation, and you've to have been able to get what is the overall situation. Most want to be in their own home. They don't want their property to be sold, and certainly not given up just to a corpse that's going to drug someone. And so questions within this exist, doesn't it? And you've got a condition, for instance, if we can come to that now just for a second, as a subject, which really relates to, did you get a proper evaluation, and has that really been cross-examined and looked at, and you know, rule out sort of stuff has gone on where it's a course of action which could be taken where someone is. But the biggest thing is that you've got a chloride ion and a bicarbonate, Cl and HCO3 negatives, which is essential. They are the magnetic nutrient which really transport everything, and you're only going to be able to get that if you've got fragrant amino acid in your diet. So we could be talking about a lot of things, but like somebody's going to say, hey, the amino acid, yeah, that's right, phenylalanine. That's not important. Just drug the person, because the issue for them is only like, oh, somebody's got to have control. It's like, whoa, 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 this is very complex equivalent, not too logical, you see? So each thing is something which should be looked at, because you're looking at doing the better thing for anyone, and you've got to be able to be cross-disciplinary a little bit in what you're thinking about, and if you're not, then you get somebody who could, but and then give advice like, why should it not be that somebody's really got these fragrant amino acids, which you really do need? You've got to have phenylalanine and tyrosine and tryptophan, okay, because you've got to make neurotransmitters and things like that. And what is this which we're talking about? We're talking about metabolism. You've got to have metabolism to be able to have any brain function. And the way that you think, or anyone, wouldn't that be equivalent to actually what nutrient and things that you've got in your brain? Yes, it is. So why would anybody want to rule any of that out? That's just so bad if they did wrong. Put it in right now, because you must benefit whoever, and you've got like products like the Gouda cheese that we made, which is essential for this north negative, because you really need to neutralize the south positive which you've got coming in your diet, and something has got to really be in an orthophilic state, meaning it's straight with nature. So if it's orthophilic, it's got carbon, it's got things which life has, and it's come through life as an element, plus it's enzymatically linked, see? And this is what life is. What happens when that's not? Dead, sediment, doesn't have a zeta potential, toxin, outright. Okay. So wherever somebody is, you want to think better? Yes. Get rid of toxin. It's not logical if you don't. And what's the unphysiological salt that comes in everybody's diet? You can only have 6 grams of it. It's like, uh-oh, dead salt. That's right. Does that have any permittivity or conductivity or capacity to be able to have proper antioxidant ability because it's got enzymatically linked? No, it's dead. Okay, it's equivalent to just go ahead and lick a rock right now and reckon that you're going to have proper brain function. Bull dust, you're not. Okay, so somebody's going to say, hey, dementia, it's not like all of a sudden kind of you don't know what you're thinking about or you can't remember or something. It's like, uh-oh, well, that's okay. That happens to everybody. Now, but like overall, could something be that wasn't where the original picture was, but if you put this back there, it is going to help and cause a capacity for something to function. And so you really need, where something is, for anything to be undone, for instance, that's been done, another opinion, and probably usual you should, because you've got to rule out that an unphysiological salt is not what would cause edema for somebody who has some condition that is like cystic fibrotic, which is where your chloride and your bicarbonate isn't essential as like it should be, as far as a ligand that transports these two magnetic elements through the membrane of your body. The almond Gouda is really full of dense, packed, essential magnetic nutrients. You can't get anything more dense. Okay, why? Well, because you've got to have colony-forming factor, you know, and life colloid like L. salivarius malplanetarium, which is really missing. And what do you do with that? It's got the fragrant amino acids. Yes, it does. So has anything that you ate got any zeta potential, meaning it could be suspended in a fluid, and it's got a magnetic static field, and it can easily participate in something else also, dynamic to pass a current on and what have you, but it's got a zeta potential and it could slip through another field and not be affected by that. So where you cook food doesn't have zeta anymore. So is that going to get into little pores that you have, the smallest ones? Like, what's that? 40 nanometers wide, and a bit smaller too inside the cells. Okay, you've got Figaro inside cells, which is maybe only 4, 5, 6, 10 nanometers, but can expand it a little bit. And then you've got 40 nanometer sort of pores, which are there in the membrane of a nucleus. So you've got a sodium and potassium pump, which you cannot get a current to flow dynamic unless you've got these magnetic element, you see. And the fluid inside and outside all have to be able to have a bit of a flow. And cystic fibrosis is a syndrome. It's not a disease of itself. It's a syndrome. So it's not a label. It's really to do more with, you know, feed me properly and don't give me any toxin. And that's the that's the diagnosis of cystic fibrosis, which somebody's going to say that they don't have any part of what that is. Like Google says, bull dust. 30% or more of all people that die suffer from a whole range of tissues which relate to cystic fibrosis. Also, how come there's 4,000 variants that's been found? And so somebody's going to say that their tissue's not impacted epigenetically. What does that mean? It means the punctuation between the DNA has been changed. Okay, so you look, you see DNA's there, yeah, but punctuation has been changed. Okay, so well, that means, you know, epigenetically, you know, there could be a lot of tissue which is cystic fibrotic. What does that mean? It means it really, without phenylalanine there, keep it in your brain right now and stop what you're doing and think about this. You've got rock salt. Have you ever seen somebody who's got tattooed? You know, everything could come and go, but the tattoo remains. People have tattooed themselves with a lot of stuff. It accumulates, and then it aids. Otherwise, if you've got it, this is phenylalanine, in carbon dioxide transport. You've got chloride ions that are exchanger, bicarbonate ions and exchanger, and you've got red blood corpuscles because they're not cells, because they don't have any DNA, they're corpuscles, red blood corpuscle. And during the chloride shift, which is essential, you've really got a transport of carbon dioxide from the tissues in the lungs. What happens when you don't have that? You feel dizzy. Yes. Nobody's going to say that what you've exhaled, like from the carbon and not having kept it, because did somebody watch that you breathe through your nose all the way through your sleep? Good if you do. Otherwise, you've lost the carbon that should be there, because carbon is what's going to give you a proper magnetic field. Nobody's going to say that that's got nothing to do with dementia. It sure does. It's got everything to do with dementia. Like when you see someone drunk, it's like, you reckon that they're not affected? Hell yes. When someone eats a massive amount of flesh, carbs, fat, heavy protein, carb, fat together, you're going to tell me that they can't remember the very things in the morning? Bloody oath, that's a common thing. Also, too, can you follow the logic? Would you be able to repeat anything that I've said? I'm sure you can if you just go over it, because it's just like Pavlovian conditioning. But if you reduce carbon dioxide transport, do you think that's going to impact the way that your brain functions? Yes, it does, including your reasoning and things like that. So don't tell me that somebody doesn't have to act prudent. Wherever you are, you do. So it's not like, but you've to act prudent, very important. So nobody could say that there wasn't a monopoly of Rockefeller, like in C.B. Cower, which is a criminal banking cartel of one world order that owned Big Pharma. That's directly just stopping all the knowledge that's being passed down properly. And so you've only got a group think. And what's that? Wow. Personally, it could be this group think, good. Otherwise, pretty deficient. Let's think about it. But you could imagine that. What would be the reason why you would want to stop herbal remedies and things like that? Don't you think that's an asymmetric warfare just being applied like in a monosynthetic sort of coupled down you know, dead material. And if it's anything to do with business, that paid all for the scientific what? To have an empty advancement? Yeah. Somebody's going to say that's not so. Most professionals do. So, yeah, doesn't it make sense to you here? If you've never heard how cystic fibrosis is something which is a major condition all over the earth, why haven't you? Because Google says it's not, because it's just stupid. It's just programmed to say something existed and put something to that, but it's a very great, deep, complex equivalent, isn't it? A lot of that. But not this, what I'm talking to you about. You've got to stop the regulatory processes which would have gone on that's just established with drugs. Oh, people hate that word, drugs. No, they'd love to call it medis. It's like candies, you know, get your candy, get your candy. Everybody knows that point, you know, half a milligram could be something that's so deadly today, that's wrong. So it's rigorous. Somebody has to guard against iatrogenic condition because 250,000 deaths are every year. And is that 1 million people every 4 years? Yes. And is that underestimated? Yes. So, okay, like wake up. If somebody just said, you've got a 30% chance of an iatrogenic condition, if you're got a power of attorney and you're prudent, you better be focused on anything that relates to iatrogenics. Definitely. So where the hard sell was like, yeah, get your Ajax or whatever, no functional dominant form of healthcare intervention comes to exist much, and it's a shift that's very much influenced by several factors, including like all the companies, there's pharmaceutical marketing and their budgets, and providing a product where healthcare professionals are, which is wrong. Why? Because it's synthetic. And there's too many things about that, which is monopoly and doesn't make sense, you see. So did anybody put a claim forward that said, look, I think the organisation that actually killed Galileo is really wrong, it's criminal? And so until some claim is expressed, it's really not expressed, is it? You see, so the world goes on. But you've got a direction of focus that's really quick fixes, and it's often really a greater emphasis on pharmaceuticals, synthetics, and no question about toxicity. So barriers really exist to a monopoly, certain, and the conflicted information and misinformation. It's really a constant stream that where somebody's gone on and the information is rife. But how about come to us and get a master course in really being able to think better? But if you really got into heavy processed food, or somebody did that, and typically they just had frozen, canned food, dead food, and is that going to be promoting optimal healing? No. But if it's not part of the diagnosis, is people going to pay attention to it? No. And there you go. You see? So pay attention to it in the diagnosis. Like if somebody gets cystic fibrosis, it's not a disease, it's not a label, it's something that helps people understand what to do for you. Don't give me toxin, give me nutrient. And that's what that means. So cystic fibrosis, like we just talked about above here, is epigenetically really meaning it's absolutely oxidizing and changing the way that DNA is actually able to function. And somatostatin, if you listen to our shows, that's raised when you do heavy complex carbs, fat, and protein meals combined. It causes acute pancreatitis. Don't tell me that's not something going on where someone's aged. Of course it is. So it's a premature activation of the digestive enzymes, and sticky mucus is lacked, in the pancreas, and its capacity to empty the pancreas itself, leading to that organ digesting its own tissue, And so, what caused that? I just told you, a stupid dead food meal that caused pancreatitis. Wake up. Don't tell me that's got nothing to do with someone's condition. It has everything to do with someone's condition. And whether that person knows it or not, because they don't want to do drugs, a big list of a drug cocktail exists, and how and when and what was the past of the consumption of that drug zombie cocktail should be examined, especially if it's got discontinued, drugs in it. So it's digesting. You've left the pancreas just to digest in its own tissue. God help us, how bad is that? Somebody could have really a deeper insight than you, and you should connect with someone who has some insight, so somebody could really be prudent and follow things properly, because otherwise, if you don't guard against iatrogenic condition, somebody's just going to be let go, and what goes on, they just stick the person on a unphysiological salt. What's going to happen after that? They're going to swell up. They're going to have edema, and then they're going to have septicemia. And isn't that what goes on? Yes, it is. So dead food, frozen, canned, dry, hospital, pudding isn't going to support the value of anybody in your kitchen or your pantry. It's not enzymatically active. It robs everything more from your body. The acne cell damage is radical in your pancreas. It injures the death of all the pancreatic acne cells. And the primary cells is responsible for producing digestive enzymes. So where you're eating food and you don't have this diagnosis, what are they going to do? Give you food without any digestive enzymes. I mean, that's pretty weird. It's really weird. Too complicated for someone, but it's not. Listen, don't do more damage. The acne cell damage and injury, death for the pancreas cells and the primary cells responsible for digestive enzymes really doesn't exist. Wake up. Put enzymes into the food and make food which does have its enzyme value. Be logical. So the fibrocystic types of condition and fibrosis and growths and things that can have gone on wherever endothelial tissue is and connective tissue and things like this. You've got breasts, you've got meninges, you've got uterus, you've got pancreas, you've got various areas of the brain, the arachnoid fibrosis where meninges are. You've got leptomeningeal sort of fibrosis types of conditions that can affect and cause centimeters of growth, which could be dissolved. You stop the fuel that's feeding that, which is glutathione and methionine. So don't give those amino acids. Why? Because it feeds neoplasm. And it's unnecessary. It's not part of our breast milk. It's not part of anything much that we have in colostrum and things for our species. And surrounding the brain and spinal cord, you really can have got more scarred tissue and thickened values where scans can show excessive collagen and excessive extracellular matrix deposit in the pancreas, never not. Just the same as the brain. You don't think that actually you could get away with eating a dead food diet, raising somatostatin, causing the stomach to be shut down in the pancreas because of it, and getting just fuel secondarily through protein and fat getting broken down and finally getting a bit of glycol molecule from it. It's like, wow, how bad is that? The whole time that happened, there was no glucagon, there was no human growth hormone, there was no insulin. There was no juices like they should be from the pancreas. And what goes on? Scarring inside the pancreas, and you never find it not without stone and calcification. So our program, cyst people don't form more stone. So stop all the high phosphate, because that's part of a definition of live food. You've got a calcification of stone otherwise and deposits in the tissue and stuff like that. You can run a pen up and down your arm and you can feel the hardened, silent inflammation. That's really what we go after in Jubb cell rejuvenation. These are the sorts of things that gets targeted. So for people listening, the answer more is that you're coming up with that we come to, which is it's more talking about what Jubb cell rejuvenation is, but yet you really need to start somewhere. So why not start with this podcast right now and pass it on? Why don't you summarize and implement these points which we're talking about? Why don't you, with a good conclusion, which is existing here, where research is over 53,000 hours behind this, you've got a proper leverage and a nice database within what I've said to identify a broader spectrum. And you could see that there's, how can there be just only 4,000 variants in cystic fibrosis across different ancestry? It is limited to the amount of study, that's all. All we could say is it's broad. And according to the National Institutes, you've got gene size and the complexity of that, which is largely gene. And so like the CFTR gene we're talking about in cystic fibrosis, you've got really more DNA base pairs that is increasing the possibility of changes in sequence, leading to a whole range of variations in the tissue, like the brain and the pancreas. And Jubb rejuvenation targets these things and influences the numerous other variants which really could help. But if you stopped and didn't do this, are you delayed anybody's recovery? Of course you have. Why? Well, because you've got de novo variants ongoing where food is brought in that impairs DNA and continuously stops repair and increases more mutation, you see. So you're going to say that's not part of what someone's capacity to think right is? Yes, it is. Highly. You've got iatrogenic conditions otherwise, which is really treatments which end up causing harm. So how is it when a corporation is above your head? You're not connecting with anyone who is just running something. It's like, my God, that's going to be not too good. You've got a central organized nervous system within yourself, but 3-4 people don't have that between them. Existing it is sort of, so underneath you've got a typical condition of a cystic fibrotic epigenetic type of condition and variant, and snippet genes and things like this, which comes in huge. You're not going to tell me that that doesn't relate to also cystic fibrosis symptoms. It sure does. So, this is looking deeper into the subject of a whole array of types of variants which do exist, and the reasons which you should be kept behind not the idea, a lie is existed that it is a very rare condition. Don't bother with this, what I'm talking to you about. So, look, I'd say 40,000, 200,000 rare variants. Yeah, that's right. How could this be kept a secret and told a lie where it's a rare condition? Don't worry. Don't listen to him. Because why? This doesn't have anything to do with someone getting labelled as demented because they don't want to take a drug that makes them a zombie. When people say, take the zombie drug, that's it, and keep away. Compassionate communication is far better than an antipsychotic medication, and everybody will tell you that. The mind really does have variance and deletion and insertions going on. At the same time, you've really got location where the genes are, and you've really got, to see a bigger picture here, you've got massive possibilities that are being ruled out or ruled in. How good? Because now you're going to have a proper diagnosis. If you don't have that, you've got nothing. And so is that a problem? Yes, it is. Well, what have you got? Exposure possibly to anybody who wants to give you a zombie cocktail. Why? Why should there be attention to any nutrition? That's never turned anything round. This is what someone will say. Oh my God, this is a complex equivalent, so crazy. This is something ongoing and could take some weeks for someone to help heal up where things are. And cystic fibrosis is not a rare disorder whatsoever. You've got the average individual with 1,000 genes in the project identified for pathogenic variants, and then on the average 294 to 294 times to like in the average form, in a homogeneous form, you've got 942 times sort of thing that, and you've got various amounts that shows in a heterogeneous sort of form, it's sort of impossible to state that none of that has any impact on cystic fibrosis, which it does. Okay, so look, groupthink could be saying, hey, you better go to war, but you don't think like you want to yourself. But you're doing it. Why? Because society wants you to do it. Don't rock the boat. Don't rock the boat. As a good POA, you better be able to look to see what needs to be rocked, because some people could be just on something and just like, how bad is that? Why don't we correct those things, which you can? So if you change the DNA sequence, which has gone on, and that can have caused a person to be at risk, and there's a definite epigenetic types of conditions like cancer, pathogenic variants, inherited sort of conditions that are recessive but can only come about where somebody sort of is under stress. And so Jubb cell rejuvenation really is targeting all of this very specifically, and salt isn't got any property itself, unphysiological. It's not a life food state. It has a value which is could be measured by how much attention have you got to the dead salt, and are you aware of that? You reckon that that's not innocuous? I just told you that the vast majority of people, when they go to hospital, they've got a CF variant in them. They're pumped full of unphysiological salt, and what happens? They get edema. And so what happens after that? They get septicemia. When you have edema, by the way, can your brain function? No. So if you see someone while their brain's not functioning, will you give them some score? Maybe, but it may not be overall for everything, and that's what I'm talking about here. In medical terms, you reduce inflammation. You should do that. If you didn't, like, and you're just getting something, how come you're not focused on raising albumin, which you must, okay, because that's absolutely carrier. You've got to have a high albumin-globulin ratio. To do that, you've got to reduce globulins. You've got to reduce all unphysiological salt. You've got to get rid of all the inflammatory types of material that is, and it's so easy just to do a lemon bicarb shot, do live food, forget everything else, do castor packs. Why wouldn't you have done that? Oh, no. That's like, no, oh, hell no. Let's just seat the person, leave them in bed. That's it, finished. Hydrolysis, methylation processes where DNA could be turned on or off should be being activated where it's not. And so you've got somatostatin in the diet. Yes, you do, because, you know, you've got fat, protein, complex carb, heavy combined, glutathione and thionine, high phosphate, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. You've got, you know, blood sugar problem. You can't regulate blood sugar. Don't tell me that that's got nothing to do with neurotransmitters, but it's the very reason why your brain's not functioning. That's a metabolic condition, not a neurotransmitter. So where are you looking? That's the thing. Is it functional? Medical is really terms of what's pathogenic, life colloid, and the terrain of conductivity, negative redox, and parts of pH is part of your terrain that has to be kept steadful. That has to be corrected, because your cells are only living within that. Jubb cell rejuvenation focuses on what this is. So you've got aerobic glycolysis, which is not the proper types of way to get energy. You're supposed to have oxidative metabolism. Yes, you do. Otherwise, you've got a neoplastic state. That's just, you've got to turn that around, and it's switched off, you see. So trigger glucagon. Life food does that, okay? Everything else is not going to do it. If you look deeper, you could start to connect the dots. Be about holding on to what property that you have. And what's that? The property to reason, not just give it away, because why? Someone wants to eventually have a treatment which can engage drugs which are toxic, or a condition ongoing which is not listened or checked out any of this, which has led to an iatrogenic condition more. So protein, complex carbs, heavy fat is never going to have any enzyme much to be able to process that. It's got little value left. It's got an empty, dead, skeletonized calorie. That's right, dead food. It's got the molecule of death in it coming from the flesh. and glyconeurominic acid if it came from cows, and all sorts of other surfactant if it came from something else that's an animal. Rejuvenation is really what you want. You want Jubb cell rejuvenation. You've got to clear away the stone. You've got to do castor packs and things. You've got to focus this being more a metabolic condition, and you could heal things up. You could not have the pancreatitis sort of inflammation and have only got malabsorption, and you've got to be able to digest food properly. So healing up in Jubb cell rejuvenation really is an ongoing clearing up malabsorption and getting properly magnesium back and aromatic amino acid and these sorts of things. How are you going to look good, feel good, unless you've got the garden that you're wrapped around and you're focused on getting a better garden? And that's part of the reason for the Jubb scooter that we've made. So if you heal all and you leave your stones behind, you clear them away from the pancreas, you're not going to tell me that you don't get a benefit. You sure do. Why not do castor packs over the various areas for the next 42 days and begin a cleanse? Live food is very beneficial because it dissolves all the stone, and you've got to really look at neoplasm being a protein disease, like is in The Secrets of an Alkaline Body, written a long time ago, and Jubb cell rejuvenation. These are works. Why don't you look into these? It's very important. Neoplasm is a protein disease. Blood is not being formed properly in your intestine. I'm the only one in the world which is talking about how blood is formed. Everybody else, I have never heard anybody else talk about that. How bad is that? So you've got to activate the membrane, and you've really got to use far infrared science and other things like this to actually get results. And you're going to reverse disease. You're going to improve hygiene of your blood. You're going to get better albumin globulin ratio. And you're not going to tell me that pancreatitis isn't got because you're just eating dead food. It doesn't have any enzymes. It's full of fat and protein. It's just going to have turned the pancreas off. What you're going to survive, but you don't know the craziness of the lifestyle that you've eaten. You're junked out on enriched cereals. They've got all the iron filings on it, toxic heavy metals, magnetite, pancreatic stone, and typically made of pieces of calcium carbonate that really gets hardened pancreatic enzymes and from the pancreas into the small intestine, and flushes that we do causes a liquefaction of your intestinal tract. And with lemon and bicarb and vinegar and these things, which we've recommended for a long while, and castor oil, we're the ones in the whole world which is actually causing this to become a booming right now. So it really is. So pancreatic duct tube all gets dumped out, cleared away, extraneous foul-smelling debris cleared away. The apple, lemon and vinegar and bicarb dissolves and helps everything. You see, you've got drainage and clearing of the pancreas, and so you've got a far better condition after 42 days. And don't tell me that blood being clean and albumin being raised doesn't get a better brain function. It sure does. So are you interested in cell rejuvenation, or are you just babysitting? Iatrogenic toxin is heavy metalloid, like we talked about, petroleum-based, and you can't have any foods and stuff like that. Psychiatric and heart drugs and things like that, antibiotics and diuretics, immunosuppressants and drugs and things, all really medications have a stronger association to form stone. So we've got a bit here, haven't we? I think on the bright side, you really could get a better diagnosis, get one that's not a label, but get one that's a syndrome. Cystic fibrosis sure is, and that can be helping. Why? Because you could get on a program, get rid of your stone, raise albumin, reduce globulin by reducing inflammation, focus on the things that you can do. The brain and the pancreas are connected. You've got to gut the mind to mind the gut. If you could note the importance of getting rid of rock salt, or, oh, you don't think about that, but it's actually in all the food, and did anybody have a diagnosis that says, don't put rock salt in my food? No. Is that important? Well, I would say it's seriously important. Why should that be not looked into? It's just things that it should be. Edema really leaves the mouth dry, drowning state. All the water can be pulled out from the cells surrounding a rock salt, going toward that outside the cell magnetically, pulling all the water to itself away from the cell, drying and dehydrating the cell and shrinking all the cell volume until it's aged. It's dehydrated. And so in some cases, no fluid really is encountered, and these are deaths which is sort of like a cell dry drowning, a mechanism of death sort of hydrostatic or magnetrolically extraneous sort of rock salt is held water in the tissue. And don't tell me that doesn't create POTS, a postural orthostatic tension syndrome. It means I feel dizzy when I go to stand up. Somebody's going to say, hey, you don't have POTS, or whoa, you feel dizzy? That's not POTS, or whoa, your cardiac reflex loss, that's pulmonary. Hey, that's got nothing to do with CF. Bull dust, it sure does. See a cystic fibrosis specialist straight away. They're going to be able to understand this podcast far more than any other field. So in particular, the CFTR defect significantly consequence is, for your brain and nervous system, the enteric nervous system, that's your brain and your gut. They're connected. So in particular, live food can protect you and impact and cause you not to have, emotional instability, but a balance and a coordination and the autonomic nervous system normalization and reactivity is got a break. And what's that above it? The CNS. The nerve that flows all the way down your gut to your gut and connects your brain is above the ANS, and that's the ENS, the enteric nervous system. So somebody's got to keep some of this bit in mind. You should know what out of somatostatin actually block and stop the stomach. What did I do to cause that to have been going on? Why didn't you look into this? You see, past medical history sort of is really something, and the social information that relates to someone's lifestyle habit and those sorts of things, it's all part of a diagnostics. So, somebody should be trained, and Jubb cell rejuvenation really is not a technique, but it's information more for you right now, like in this podcast, about your body functioning and you waking up to how you could get that to function a bit better. And don't tell me that it couldn't, because it can. And don't tell me that if you can make it better, you shouldn't. That's stupid. Do it. When ginkgo gives you better brain function, give some ginkgo. Where glucagon is what you need, pay attention to the very things that can cause you to have glucagon for the rest of time. Okay? You've got to have alkaline element like the chlorine bicarb ligands to be able to transport everything, and genetically that could have been a compromise epigenetically. If you've got sticky mucus, you've got edema, you've got things like that, don't tell me that actually that's not a condition of cystic fibrosis. It sure is. Okay? Encephalopathies are all very common, and prion, like all the material we're talking about, a substance which is like a protein but can't be broken down and causes a misfoldedness, and this is prion. You see, nobody's going to say that that's not full on in all the pharmaceuticals and things quite a bit, that they have prion condition and stuff, you see. Yeah. So anyway, I hope our program today has been helpful to people, and that we've got, a bit of material here that could go forward with. Anyway, look, I love you, mate, and we'll keep this just to be good and brief where we are. Let's get on with another program when we can. Yeah. Anyway, I love you, mate. Love you, mate. Catch up to you, mate. Goodbye.